Good morning, everybody. We are finally back out here in the cold hardy citrus trial rows, and we are long overdue for an update. A lot has changed since our last tour of these rows, and we've definitely been working really hard on adding a lot of new varieties, but also breeding and selecting a lot more. As you could tell, our seedling selection row is a lot longer than it was before, and it's not even complete. And that's something I'll tell you guys. This update is not everything we have at the moment. It's everything that is planted out at the moment. And maybe I'll show you some of the other stuff in the greenhouse that's in progress. But we do have some really exciting open pollinated selections that I've made that I do have high hopes for. And we're seeing a lot of positive progress with our selections, which I'm really, really happy about. But now's a great time of year because we could really see, okay, not only did stuff make it through the winter unscathed or with a little bit of damage, but now we could see how is it growing after all that time? What kind of vascular damage did it really take? What kind of recovery, if any, is it making? So I want to take you guys through here. I won't blab too much because there is just so much to go through. This could easily be like a 2 or 3 hour update, so we'll try not to take that long, but I do suggest you get comfortable because we got a lot of varieties to go through. Firstly, as you saw, we did start off this video with the Thomasville citrangequat. This is one of our survivors that we left out here. I didn't leave many of these original grafted plants, mostly for the reason that with this original approach, grafting mature wood onto this smaller trifoliate orange rootstock, we didn't get very big plants, but we got very precocious plants. Thomasville is just so eager to flower and fruit, which is great, and I admire that effort, but it's not very conducive towards hardiness because for cold hardiness, we want these plants to get as big and thick as possible. You know, it is directly proportional, these plants' hardiness and their trunk thickness. So we want to make sure they're putting on as much size as possible and ideally not setting too many fruit because that excessive fruit load will also take away from their hardiness. Some of my solutions for this, which you'll see right here, we have 2 new additions, and honestly, depending, I may have a 3rd addition, which could displace this plant even, which is a Thomasville with a Citrumelo or a Citrandarin, so a more vigorous hybrid inner stock on trifoliate orange rootstock. So we get those absolute hardiness and, you know, in terms of being able to grow in really tough clay soils, we get that from the trifoliate orange rootstock, and then that more vigorous inner stock will speed up the growth of the scion variety. So we will get a more vigorous, ideally less immediately fruitful Thomasville citrangequat, which I have tested. I've grafted this onto Swingle Citrumelo in the greenhouse, which again, maybe we'll see by the end of this video, and it's done much, much better. It's focused on growth a lot more, and it's still blooming now, just in its first year. So even on more vigorous rootstocks, it's still precocious, but maybe less so. It does still grow enough to kind of balance it out, I think. So that's more the approach I'm trying to go. The other approach, though, is grafting juvenile material, high grafted, mind you, on trifoliate orange rootstock. That's kind of the theme for a lot of these plants. I did try high grafting things this year, like truly high, because Virginia fruit growers always talked about this, and I've seen it directly for myself too. Plants that are high grafted simply weather the coldest winters better. The cold air will settle, and if your graft is down low, on certain less hardy varieties, it can actually make the difference, and they might not make it through the winter if that graft takes a lot of damage. And that's certainly something we noticed not only on some of the less hardy varieties, but also some of the plants that were planted a little bit too late and could have used that boost. But we just didn't have enough taller rootstock last year. So now that we do, I tried implementing it wherever possible. It's still not 100% across the board, but more plants than average are high grafted. So the Thomasville citrangequat with the juvenile material, it's kind of following that same idea of having something that's going to grow more vigorously first and then flower later. And because we have to go through the actual maturation period, this buys us at least a couple years of solid growth where you could see this, it's getting to a much better caliper than it was as a mature scion. So this will grow a lot more vigorously first, hopefully weather the winters better in the long term, and we can worry about fruit later. I have enough Thomasvilles already where I just want a couple that will be bulletproof, at least in the long term. So that's our Thomasville citrangequat here. Now for our Yuzu, which follows here, as you can see, our plant from last year is absolutely exploding with growth. I mean, I can't express to you guys just how happy I am with how Yuzu has done here. And mind you, I know a lot of you watching and a lot of our customers also live in North Carolina. So if you live in North Carolina, zone 7B plus, I would say, so if you live in a similar zone to us or you're further east or south than us, you can also get away with Yuzu. This took no damage the past winter down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. We know it can even take colder, and it just did really, really well. It has a strong dormancy period, which is very important for late frosts here. And it produces great fruit. This one hasn't bloomed or fruited, but we had one in the greenhouse that did, and the fruit were great fresh. So I did make 2 more clones of this particular one, high grafted. Not that it needed to, because this one was actually grafted quite a bit lower. As you can see, that's the graft point, and it still did just fine, and it grew very vigorously, but I'm just trying to keep this as our good practice here. We also have another strain of Yuzu, so I'm considering this our western strain and our eastern strain, because this one originated from California and the West Coast, and this one originated from Florida. So different budwood programs and different appearing Yuzu. When I've grown them out, this one tends to have larger fruit, larger leaves, kind of broader, darker color, stuff like that. So subtle differences I've noticed. So I do believe they are different strains. So why not grow both of them and compare them? Because there could be subtle differences in hardiness or any other aspects of these plants. Next, after that, though, we have our Ichang Papeda. This one is the same one as you might see at the Ralston Arboretum. It's the one without the juice in the fruit, so it's really just more of an ornamental citrus. I'm less excited about this one, although it had some prospects for breeding because it does produce zygotic seeds still. I'm more excited about this one, which I added 3 of. This one is the Ichang Papeda that has the juice in it. So if you look online, you'll see there's different types of Ichang Papeda. This is the one where the fruit resemble kind of like a Yuzu, both in shape and in terms of the interior, actually not too far off, maybe a little bit less flesh, but supposedly the fruit quality is something between a lemon and a kaffir lime and different citrus like that. It does still kind of have that woody aroma that Ichang Papeda is known for, but basically this one seems a lot more promising to use for breeding too, because if it already has those desirable attributes to begin with, and it should be relatively equally hardy. Again, we're going to put that to the test here, high grafted. I think it'll be a much better breeding partner. And also just a great ornamental. There are some differences already where this one seems to have bigger, broader leaves, and it has the anthocyanins in the new growth, so that reddish, purplish new growth. That's something I'm really excited about, and I'm looking for in some of our new seedling selections, because I have noticed it in just a few hardy citrus and a few of the ones we've selected, and I think it's really beautiful. So it is something I'm hopefully trying to preserve some of those genetics there. But yeah, we got 3 of these Ichang Papeda I'm really excited about, and if you guys haven't seen already, I did put the 4th one up for auction, really just because I'm trying to keep it no more than 2 or 3 of each variety, and any extras we had of these we were kind of pulling out and swapping a lot of these new varieties into, so trying to be space efficient, so we did have a little more than we needed, and I am trying to just propagate these in general for the nursery, but we're just not up to that scale yet, because as you can tell, we only have 3 plants actually out here in the field. Following that, our 10-degree Tangerine, it's been a mixed bag with this one, I gotta tell you. It might have just been because this was grafted too low and some of the growth was still flushing out when we were getting a lot of rain last fall. But it survived and it's regrowing very vigorously, just like the Yuzu is, which is really shocking for how edible this one is. It did just take some trunk damage, which has kind of progressed from that point where we had to cut it there, those branches that had died back. But half the trunk is still alive, and I'm just gonna see if it ends up regrowing and covering that up. I'm not entirely sure what's gonna happen here, but hey, it wants to grow. The plant itself looks great, barring that damage, so I'm gonna give it a shot. And I did graft one a little higher up this time. Honestly, I could have used an even higher rootstock, really, but we have another 10 degree here, which I think was just starting to flush out. But some of these grafts you'll see out here in the field are very, very new, so we're just kind of letting them do their thing, and they'll look a lot better later in the season. So now we have our Prague plants. I did keep quite a few of these just because Prague has been highly in demand, and we're trying to keep up with budwood so we could keep grafting these out for you guys. So we're trying to make sure we have lots of Prague plants on hand, and this is kind of just for our nursery stock. Really, I don't need this many of these plants, though I gotta say the thought of having like a grove of Prague plants is very tempting in the future, so we might keep them all, we'll see. But more importantly than these plants here, which you can see all did great, we pruned them back from the winter, grafted those cuttings, and now they've flushed out nicely again. Our one in the greenhouse actually did also flower too, but it didn't set fruit. But these Prague plants I'm more excited for because these are implementing those inner stalks like I was telling you guys. So the first two plants here are actually grafted onto Swingle Citrumelo. And Citrumelo rootstock, as you can tell when we see the others, is definitely a more vigorous inner stalk. But we're going to see if these are able to survive on these inner stalks and if they will have any beneficial effects on them at all. More vigor, more production, anything favorable, but ideally more production is kind of what I'm going for, which I'm not fully expecting from the Citrumelo, which we also have 5-star Citrumelo here. That's another graft, so we got a 5-star scion wedged in between there. But towards the end here, I do have, this one is a Tri interstock. So kind of like Rare Grows in New Jersey has his grafted on Tri, I have this one on a Tri interstock. So we'll see if that affects its production out here. And lastly, there is one on X639, so a vigorous Citrandarin. Not as vigorous as the Citrumelos, but again, this is all just for comparing and seeing. But I did have one grafted on US 942 too. We actually auctioned one off on its own roots, well, on US 942 roots. But I had one on a US 942 interstock, and it just didn't work out. So I'm actually regrafting that combination, and I'd love to get it out here before it's too late. I really only have a couple more weeks, and if these plants aren't out by, start of July, it's kind of getting too late, and we're not going to have enough time for them to harden off. Really, ideally, by this point, we're kind of pretty much done with stuff going out here, because we want to have a long season for these plants to grow and mature and harden off. And that's why I recommend to people planting citrus, plant them in the springtime. They need every advantage they can get. And maybe if it's a more hardy variety, it doesn't necessarily need it, but it's just good practice to do so. And, it can't hurt. Following, though, those Prague interstocks, I'm really excited for this variety. We have the Prague Satsuma and Ponerus cross. So Maiho XPT. This is that Citrandarin developed by Alan Bishop. So this is like the pineapple Citrandarin, as people have been calling it. I really want to taste it and put that to the test because I think that's an exciting flavor profile. Kind of reminds me of what I've heard about US 119, which we also have a fruit of, so that'll be fun too. Following the Maiho XPT, we do have the Bishop Citrandarin. Again, we saved about 3 of these from last year and actually relocated some permanently too, which is really awesome that they get permanent homes. Same with US 942 and some of the other Citrandarins. We did move out from here and freed up space as well. Bishop's doing good, but with both Bishop and US 852, they're definitely a little more patient, a little slower in terms of the time in between growth flushes. They're just kind of chugging along right now. We got a couple new flushes on the smallest plant, but these are just, hanging out here ever since their first spring flush again. So they're looking good otherwise, and they weathered the winter very well. Yeah, actually, you could tell this one's starting to flush out now too. Next here, we have US 942, which I did cut back again on this one too. No more than 3 for all of these. I did cut back on the number we had and permanently planted some of these. One of them is on Trifoliate orange rootstock down here. So this one's about a year younger than the other 2, which are on their own roots. But all of these plants are doing really, really good. I was actually surprised this one hasn't bloomed yet, considering the size on some of these. But I'll be patient. Maybe next year. But it would be really great to see some fruit on US 942. This is one where I do have a lot of you who live in quarantine states who are asking for seed, because I can still send seed, I just can't send live plants or cuttings. But that's an opportunity for the future. If I could get these to yield anything, let alone yields a little more heavily, it'd be really great to have a seed source for US 942. So we're working on it. It's just going to take some time. You gotta be patient with some of these plants. Following though, I was really excited for these, which we did and technically still do, but we're about to sell out of them now. The C57 Citrandarin seeds. I do have 3 plants here, high grafted on Trifoliate orange rootstock. This is one that received really good reviews in terms of its taste and peelability. It reminded me of US 942 in a lot of ways. Potentially it could be better. I don't know. The original reviewer, which thanks Scandyberg for putting us in touch with Lynn Citrus, where one of their employees there was able to review the fruit for us, which I know the cold hardy citrus community was very grateful for. We got reviews about I think it was C52, C54, C57. I believe those were the ones. And we have 54 and 57 because those received the best reviews. But C57 seemed to be the best out of all of them, but also the least productive in terms of fruit load. But the fruit looked really good and it received a lot of good feedback. So we're growing them. And if it's anything like US 942, well, that's an exciting development. Gives us yet another good Citrandarin option. And we'll just kind of see how hardy they are. C54 is the one next to here. From what I understand, this one's just a bit more bitter than C57, and perhaps a bit more fruitful too. After those, we have our US 852 Citrandarins. Actually, no, that one's a C35. So we have a C35 Citrange here flushing out. Kind of similar parentage to the Rusk Citrange, which we'll see at the beginning of the next row, but C35 did great. The fruit are actually good quality too, but they really numb your mouth, and that's the biggest downside really, because if it didn't do that, I would recommend this one a lot more, but I wasn't quite comfortable with that level of numbing, but perhaps you can process it in a way where you can get rid of it. I just didn't have enough fruit to experiment with it to that degree. But otherwise, really good upfront taste. 852s, again, kind of doing the same thing as the Bishop Citrandarins. They're just kind of hanging out here, which is fine. You could tell by this behavior why they're so hardy, because they don't have any late flushes, or they're not as prone to it. They really take their time in between flushes, and you might only get a couple, but they're going to be fully lignified come the winter time, which is exactly what you want. After the 852s, though, we have the Benton Citranges, which these are at the very ends of the rows, and I kind of put varieties that perhaps I was less excited about at the ends of the rows because we do have the worst drainage here, and I just haven't bothered to fix it. So as long as these plants are kind of elevated enough above grade, they seem to be living and doing okay. But you can tell when we get over to the Swingle Citromelos, they're looking a little deficient, which could be due to the lack of drainage. From what I've heard, it can affect nitrogen uptake and stuff like that. But we are seeing little flushes on the Benton, and I've heard mixed things about this one, where maybe it's good, maybe it's not. Either way, our plants are doing just fine, so eventually we'll find out. They almost flowered this year. There's actually quite a few varieties that almost flowered this year. 852 and Bishop were another. Benton tried. I think 812 did. Sakaton did. There was a lot that flowered, but they were maybe less developed, or they just weren't willing to hold any flowers or fruit. So, Swingle Citrumelo here. These are doing just fine. Again, looking perhaps a little bit deficient. I did fertilize recently, and that goes for even some of these new plants you'll see here. Some of them are coming, from the greenhouse, where I actually kind of forgot to fertilize a lot of these on time. We just got so overwhelmed. So a lot of them were looking a little bit deficient, a little too light green. So we hit them all with a good dose of nitrogen, and they're starting to darken up a bit. But I did hit some of these outdoor plants too, so we're just kind of waiting and seeing what they do. Either way, the Swingle's surviving and doing fine, and it's nothing too exciting. I'm more excited about the Citromelos that are coming up. But let's go into those after the Trifiola, which I moved back here because, Its hardiness was okay. I might have planted it out too late too, but the fruit also ripened extremely late. But we have one in the greenhouse too to eventually put the fully ripe fruit to the test. But this is just kind of our outdoor specimen, kind of proving that it can live outside. And it's very precocious. It likes to flower, but it's not too promising in terms of, mostly the late ripening is a big issue. But as you can see here, which this dragonfly is resting on, our dingle, this is a dingle graft here, high grafted, because we also have a little bit of a lower dingle graft here too. So the dingle Citrumelo, kind of like your intermediate between Dunstan and Swingle. Pretty good quality Citrumelo, little on the bitter side, but it has a lot of upfront sweetness and it registered pretty good Brix levels actually. So we got a couple of them. And kind of similarly to the Iva, which is coming up, this one is actually grafted on a 5-star interstock. So it's Trifoliate, 5-star, and then dingle. Just because we were getting rid of some of the 5-star, and I'm like, well, it's a Citrumelo. I'll just graft some of the Citrumelos onto it. So we did exactly that. Sakaton, no, this isn't Sakaton. Which one are you? Oh, you're 5-star Citrumelo. So 5-star Citrumelo, as you can see here, doing really good. This is the US strain of 5-star, and the US strain is particularly hardy, especially down where we are. It just makes a great ornamental. It weathers the winter very well. You can't go wrong with this one. I do believe it's at least equal to Dunstan, probably. Could be slightly hardier, but we haven't really put that to the test, so I don't want to make any claims. But it's very hardy. So then there's another right there. This one, okay, we're going to get into some varieties I'm very excited about and are very, very rare. They're hardly accessible here in the US, but we finally managed to get our hands on these. So we have the Ichang Star 60, which I believe is an Ichang Papeda and 5-star Citrumelo hybrid. These are just starting to grow out on these outdoor grafts. I do have these in the greenhouse too, but look at that mixed foliage. Look at those anthocyanins, that kind of reddish growth too. What a pretty variety, and it makes these beautiful juicy fruit that are supposedly not that bad. But look at that, you could tell that Ponerus, that Papeda, all those mixed genetics in this one. So really exciting to test those outdoors. And right next to it is another exciting one. This is the European strain of the 5-star Citrumelo. This one in particular is called Improved 5-star because supposedly the fruit are even better than the original, which is even better than the US strain. I don't know. We're gonna put all of this to the test. That's why they're out here. And we've got a little graft that's just starting to pop out there also of the Improved 5-star. So hopefully we'll have a few different strains of some of these to offer. Just like we have the Swingle and the Iva Swingle, you know, your standard and improved. That's kind of the idea with some of these others too, which is really cool. Some might be hardier and some might taste better, and you kind of make that trade-off in your head. Sakaton right here, starting to flush out again. And believe it or not, this other one had some flushes. And is it growing back? Yes, it's growing back. I don't know if you guys see that there. This one was getting attacked by ants. They were trimming off the new growth, and it was literally just falling off in the wind. So yeah, we treated the ants, and now we're letting this flush out again, and hopefully we'll have some pretty looking trees in not too long. But these did really well through the winter, and gosh, they're just such a dark green. They're one of those varieties out here that just, whatever it is, they're just doing really well in terms of their nutrients and everything, under equal conditions too. Let's see, what do we got here? We got a little sucker there. So these are our number 82 Citrumelos. This one I'm even more excited for than the others. This is, from what I understand, the EU's best Citrumelo. This is a really good tasting Citrumelo. I believe it originated in Switzerland or somewhere like that. But the fruit look very, very good from what I've seen. And I've talked about it with people on forums and kind of compared it to the Iva Swingle. And they seem at least similar. And if anything, in the future we could have a shootout between these. Like, what's better, number 82 or Iva Swingle? They're the best from both countries that we have so far, or I should say both regions of the world that we have so far. So it'd be really interesting to compare those, because at least in the grand scheme of things, the Iva Swingle feels a bit newer. And we are kind of seeing a lot of stuff pop up more recently. People are paying attention and making these selections that are actually turning out to be really good. Iva Swingle, of course, is another bishop selection, which we'll get to. It's coming up there. But number 82, really good looking fruit. Dunstan is doing fantastic here. It's flushing out so vigorously. And it's funny, this Dunstan is kind of similar to Trifoliate orange in a sense, and maybe it just embraces those genetics a bit more. It yellows up a lot in the winter, and you're like, man, this is kind of ugly looking plant. At least as these small plants. It'll change when they get more bark on them, and you know, you won't see that as much, but they looked a little bit rough. But they were surviving fine. They weren't really damaged or anything unless they had really tender late growth. But now they are just growing vigorously. I mean, massive new shoots. Kind of reminding me of that Yuzu over there, but even more. So Dunstan's doing well. You can't go wrong with Dunstan. This was like the former Citrumelo king, and now we have some other varieties that are looking to dethrone it, and I think it's already been dethroned. But Dunstan's still a great one. If the others didn't exist, it's our next best option. You know, you can't go wrong with it if it works for you. Now we get into our Iva Swingle. As you can tell, this is another one that is on a, this is on an interstock. So 5-star interstock, Trifoliate orange rootstock, and then our Iva going all the way up here. Doing really good. This is one of those ones where I know Rare Grows pointed out too, and I can tell here the foliage is noticeably different from your regular Swingle. There's just something about it. It just looks different and it grows a little bit different. But otherwise, it's kind of hard to distinguish if you're not used to looking at Swingle all the time. This looks like any other Citrumelo, kind of like number 82. I mean, you're saying this is one of the world's best Citrumelos, and it just looks so ordinary. You know, you just can't tell with some of these until we start getting them fruiting. But we have one also high grafted on Trifoliate orange rootstock alone, and that's doing pretty good too. We hit it with some nutrients, and again, it's starting to green up a little bit more and flush out, which is great. So these are competing at a similar level. And we got one more there, also high grafted on Trifoliate orange. So just in case, because Iva Swingle originates from South Carolina, and we're not entirely sure yet the exact hardiness, but I think it's going to have no problem surviving here, really. I can't imagine it being that much worse than a lot of the other Citrumelos. Following that, we have the Tuckahoe Trifoliate orange. Doing what Trifoliate orange does. These grow pretty slowly during the season. This one bushed out a lot, and I actually had to trim out some of the excess growth because it was just too dense up there. But this is our improved strain from New York. And, well, it's hardy up there, and it's hardy down here, too. Kind of similar to the Dunstan, like I was describing. They yellow up a lot in the winter, and then it just kind of goes away, and they look good again. But this one could probably use a bit more nutrients, too, so we're going to keep hitting these with some fertilizer until they start really greening up. This one, we got a little sucker there. Just kind of hitting these as we walk through. Trying to always pay attention to that, because sometimes they could really go unnoticed. This is our Dragon Lime, which is flushing out again. And it was also putting out flowers, and I was like, oh man, are we going to get some fruit on this? I would love to finally give this one a fair assessment, but we just haven't gotten to that point yet. But it's a really cool ornamental, and it reminds me, well, our seedling selection reminds me of it. But these really curly ones are pretty cool because it seems like when Flying Dragon is the mother in a hybrid cross, it's more likely to pass down those contortions, which is really cool. If you could ever balance out the edibility and the contortions, you get a highly ornamental and also useful in the kitchen plant. Some people like Dragon Lime. I didn't hate it, but it's far from my favorite variety, and I also haven't had a really good one yet. So you guys know the deal with that. Citromon, looking great, dark, lush foliage. This survived the winter astoundingly good. I was really impressed with the hardiness of this one. We did have another specimen, but it got a little burns because I was moving it in and out of the greenhouse, which I shouldn't have done. So I actually top worked that one with Meyer lemons. So now off closer to the greenhouse, we have a Trifoliate orange rootstock, Citrumon interstock, and Meyer lemon scion, which I think will be a really good combination because Citrumon is supposed to be a really good rootstock for lemons, and it's kind of helping me bypass the supposed incompatibility between Trifoliate orange and lemons. And I don't know if that extends to the Meyer lemon necessarily, but I just thought it would be helpful, and maybe it'll perform really well too. We'll see. US 812 is flushing out nicely here again. Being a Sunki Mandarin hybrid as well, these are also supposed to taste pretty good. So if you can't tell, Sunki Mandarin is clearly a good one to be using in crosses. So I would love to use these all to make a Citrandarin quad eventually. These did flower, but we didn't get anything from the flowers. They were tiny little buds and they fell off. And now they're flushing out again. But yeah, that foliage does remind me of 942. It's funny. Kind of narrower foliage. That seems to happen with some of these Sunki Mandarin hybrids. But very interesting. You know, these plants did well throughout the winter. They seem to do slightly less good as the US 942, but it's not like they really took any damage either. It's just kind of basing it off of visuals here. These next two plants, I believe quite a few other people were excited for too, and I am as well, because I really want to test these here and hopefully they're hardy. I know they were barely hardy in Pennsylvania for Mel, who you'll see we'll get into some of his varieties we have out here too. But 1279, I forget if this one, if he got it from a rootstock and grew that out to a fruiting age, but we were able to get some fruit last year, and this one had like a mango-like taste in addition to the citrus flavors it had. The aroma of it was like an orange soap, and then the taste was kind of like orangey, mango-y kind of, and then it had some sourness to it as well, but it was very interesting. I actually quite liked it. So this is one of my favorite Citrandarins in terms of taste. So we got two of those out here. Probably could have put another, but I think two will be just fine, because I'm not sure entirely on the hardiness yet of this one. But fingers crossed, I think it might survive here. Next up, X639. We do have 3 of these, and I'm really curious about using this one, not necessarily because the fruit are supposed to be the best, but I'm curious about using this one for breeding, and I'm trying to. I've used the pollen a bit so far already because it is so precocious. I don't know if you could tell on this plant, this one has flushed the least so far, but look at all those blooms that are starting on all these branches. Every new flush on X639 has bloomed for us. On these older plants, or these other plants here, I don't know if this one's holding on to any fruit, but I know this one is. This one's got some little fruitlets there, as you could tell. And those are all throughout on these different branches. These have already flushed out a couple times already. So what you're looking at on this one is probably its second flush, and these, that might be their third flush. I'm not entirely sure, or third bloom, sorry. It's just crazy how much these bloom. They're easily, I might even say, they're our most precocious hardy citrus variety, next to the Thomasville citrangequat. Those might be tied. I'm not sure which is really ahead of the other, but if you just want something that blooms a lot, look no further than X639, Thomasville, and we'll throw Trifoliate in there too, because that one does like to bloom too. But Thomasville and X639 will just be loaded with blooms. It's really impressive. So those plants are cool for that, and you know they're plenty winter hardy here too. I noticed even their tender growth was fairly hardy, and we didn't notice any issues, which was pretty surprising. Oh, and actually you could see there's an open flower there, and I see one down here. We might be able to use the, I can't tell the pollen on this one. Yeah, maybe some of it's viable. Kind of looking through and seeing, because they aren't always viable, I've noticed on those flowers. This is a new flush on our Ponerus Plus. So we have a few different specimens, all kind of growing different. You'll see a lot of these plants we have 2 or 3 copies of. You'll see different growth habits on all of them. They're just kind of doing what they want, and within reason, sometimes I just kind of let them. They get spoiled. But the Ponerus Plus, I'm happy that these are throwing out these kind of shorter shoots. That these kind of remind me, and they might be more of those fruiting spurs. So these have the potential to fruit by next year. Oh man, I didn't even see this, guys. All right, you're seeing this with me. This is, wow. Look at this. That's a bloom on Ponerus Plus. Holy smokes. All right, guys, I'm gonna have to pollinate this when this video is over. But wow, look, it has several. And it has a fruit. Guys, what have I been doing? I haven't even been paying attention to this thing. That's unbelievable. That's more precocious than I expected. This is its 2nd year after being grafted. And you can see not all of these are doing that. These other varieties don't have any blooms on them. Not that I can tell. I can't see there. I don't know if you guys can. That's a little blurry. But Wow, how unusual. That's exciting though. So we have several blooms on our Ponerus Plus here, so that's really cool. We get to try a fruit that's grown in North Carolina, because the first one I tried also came from Mel in Pennsylvania too. So we'll see if there's a difference, if we get more sugars, anything like that. But that will be very exciting for making some cross pollinations, because Ponerus Plus does produce some zygotic seeds. So not every seedling of it has less resin. They might have varying degrees. If you grow a bunch, there's not a problem with that. And that's kind of why, like on our website, we offer them in bundles where you get multiple seedlings, and your best chances of having one that does have that quality, because you will still get a lot that are true to type. But that's exciting. We got flowers on that. That's not usual, by the way. It's second year after being these were grafted last year. So now 1 year later, we have blooms. Typically, it's 2 to 3 years, because again, they'll form those spurs. But this one kind of did have those spur branches, but you know, I still wouldn't expect that after a year. That's really, really crazy. But again, as you guys can see, this thing has already set a fruit, and I didn't even notice. So that's really cool. I might have to get a picture of that for the thumbnail. I'm not sure. We'll see. The Thomasville makes a good thumbnail one too. Following though, something I would have expected to flower within a year is our fast flowering Trifoliate, or our precocious Ponerus, however you want to refer to it. This is the one where it can flower within a year from seed. And these are high grafted, not that they need to be necessarily, but they look great. They're on some big rootstocks here. And fast flowering Trifoliate is useful because it can also produce zygotic seeds, so it may be valuable in crosses. And just for the sake of having, you know, potentially multiple blooms and having them really early on, even as a grafted plant, it does still behave differently. It'd probably behave more like that one, which I would expect. So it could be a good source of pollen, or even using as a female parent throughout the year. And growing out the seeds and the seedlings, well, you can get even more plants that will bloom precociously. So it's an interesting quality that could be taken advantage of, if not just for the ornamental value. It's really cool to have a plant that's so eager to bloom, especially in those colder zones where your options are limited, and you might be looking at fast flowering Trifoliate, or Ponerus Plus, or some of the Conestogas, which we're getting into just now. These are more great options for those of you who see negative temperatures in the winter. Starting with my favorite, which is 010, which I don't know if you could tell, the leaves are to some degree distinguishable from Ponerus. Not by much though. I mean, honestly, it almost looks exactly like it. But seeing them side by side, some of the different Conestogas, I am noticing subtle differences, very subtle. And I could just be making it up in my head. But these are truly second generation Citranges, and they do have slightly improved fruit quality over normal Trifoliate orange. Conestoga 010, which we have here again, is my favorite. 026 comes after. 010 didn't have much resin to it. It was actually pretty decent fruit, and thus good for juices and things like that. 026 might need some sort of settling period with the juice. It does have a bit more resin, but it has more orange flavor too, which is interesting. So even just having both Conestoga selections, you will get a limited but some diversity of flavor, which is always valuable when your options are limited to begin with. But yeah, the 026 is starting to flush out now. We're getting some good flushes on both of those there. Following that, this one I'm excited for, rubbing some more suckers as we go along, the Taiwanica lemon. Again, we had a customer, and I posted about this, who had a Taiwanica seedling in a pot, and it survived our very cold winter last year that killed our Ichang lemon. So Taiwanica lemon is clearly a very hardy citrus. I'm going to see how these slightly high grafted, again, they could have been higher, but it just depends what I have at a given moment. We'll see how these higher grafted Taiwanica lemons do out here on Trifoliate orange rootstock. And this is mature material too. So I'm just curious to see. I put 3 of them out here because in the off chance that they do really well, which I kind of have some faith in them now, I really like the fruit on Taiwanica lemon. Not everyone does, because I know at least the rind on it, maybe even a bit of the pith, has some sort of skunkiness to it. It has unusual aroma, which could be off-putting, but it is a true citrus, and the flavor is actually really good when used as a juice. It kind of has a complex lemony, orangey flavor to it. Maybe a little more lemon though. It's really good though. I would say it makes some of the best lemonade, even compared to Meyer lemon, which otherwise makes the best lemonade to me. So Taiwanica lemon and Meyer lemon are great for lemonade. Yuzu's not bad too, but honestly Taiwanica lemon was better than Yuzu. So very interesting to see that. I hope it does well out here. But so far, these are doing good. Again, they just came from the greenhouse, so they're a little pale, and they're getting ready to flush out some more for us. They are, though, next to the Tri, which is the hybrid between Taiwanica lemon and Trifoliate orange. And as you can see, the Tris, which I tied this one up just to get it out of the rows, they are growing ridiculously vigorously. I mean, these weathered the winter very well for being planted out late, because under those same circumstances, Trifiola got damaged and Morton got damaged. You'll notice you won't see Morton Citrange out here because I'm regrafting them higher up because I put them out too late and those low grafts did get damaged. So I'm trying to create better circumstances for Morton because it does seem a bit more marginal. However, Tri, again, under those same circumstances, did really good. One of these is from a flowering plant, and one of these is from one that is approaching flowering age, so approaching maturity. But both of them are just growing so vigorously, and they have that kind of reddish color on the new growth, which I really love. And look at those vicious thorns. Those water sprouts, those new growth, they are just insane. The amount of vigor and thorns. But you can see that old growth. It has a really pretty look. I actually really love the foliage on Tri. I think it's probably up there as one of the best ornamentals, especially considering the fruit can hold onto the tree a bit. And if you guys have seen the trees online, probably just Virginia fruit growers tree, it's so beautiful when it's loaded up with fruit. It's a really good one for those of you who live in an area that get down to, say, 0 degrees Fahrenheit. They're probably closer to that range. The Rusk Citrange behind them is doing really good, flushing out a bit more than C35 is, but not far off. These are doing good, and the fruit aren't terrible on them. They're not as good as Morton either, but still excited to see how they do out here. Rusk is certainly not a bad choice. We just have some better choices, and in general, I tend to steer people towards the Citrandarins as opposed to the Citranges. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have them in your collection or anything. They are still worthwhile if you want, a diversity of flavors, plants, and so on. But Citrandarins are just they're just better. I don't know what it is. They just interact differently with Trifoliate orange when they're crossed. The seedling row. Let's get into this. Let's see. You know what? Maybe we'll save that, actually. I'm going to go into the row next to it, and we'll come back to it because I was kind of running out of space for some stuff. This row will maybe have seedlings in it. And it will also have some varieties that we just ran out of room for in these other rows. I was trying to keep it really separate, but we're going to have some mixing. It's just inevitable. But we have a high-grafted MIC out here, your Mineola Tangelo, Citemple, the Trifoliate orange and Temple orange hybrid, and Ichang Papeda. So I think between the Trifoliate and Ichang Papeda genetics, some people have said this one's actually surprisingly hardy. I don't know if it's necessarily, zone 7B, 8A hardy, but we can put it to the test. I have another one of these plants in the greenhouse, so this one will be our sacrificial lamb. Next to it, we have some more sacrifices for the hardy citrus gods. The Arimo orange and the Arimo mandarin. So this is your Arimo citrus, your Australian citrus, and orange and mandarin hybrids. Supposedly these are cold hardy. I don't know, we'll see. This is another one where it's very hard to obtain in the United States, but they're supposed to be good. Apparently these are even hardier than a similar cross between Citrange and Arimo citrus. I don't know how, but apparently that's the case. And I've seen some reports about it, but again, we'll see if they are North Carolina hardy. We're not sure yet. Next to them, we have the Carolina lime, which we are staking up these little plants. I did high graft some of these, but This is one of those varieties where, depending, it could be a little trickier to get the grafts going. This one's shot out like a really nice sprout here, so we're going to try and train that up. But I really want to test Carolina lime both in this context and also high grafted. So we will try and add another out here at some point, because Carolina lime is really good. It's one of those hardy citrus that is like top tier good. It has a great lime flavor. It's a bit sweet. And it has great cold hardiness. It survived for stand in South Carolina very well, down to 8 degrees. We haven't even seen that in the past couple years. But, you know, I would like to see if it's capable of surviving that here or lower, and perhaps with our likely more prolonged freezes than you'd see down where he is. But Carolina lime, that's another one kind of like Taiwanica. I'm really excited for trying out here. Another one, now this is an obscure one, and it's not fully mature, but this is your HRS 899A, a seedling of US 852 that came from the EU, and it strongly resembles a normal mandarin. It doesn't look like a hybrid, let alone a 50% hybrid, but it is, and supposedly the fruit are really good as a result. But mixed reports on the hardiness, so that's what we're putting to the test here. I have another one of these in the greenhouse because, again, they're really hard to come by. After that, we have Dimicelli out here for round 2. Grafted a bit higher than last year, and again, I could have gone even higher. But I want to see how these do, perhaps with some wind and sun protection this winter. So there's a couple varieties where, if I'm not totally confident, but I think they could survive with like just a frost blanket over them, I'm going to try that with Dimicelli, and I'm going to try that with Lemandarin. Because Lemandarin's one I really want to grow out here. It looks like a great variety, and it's really a beautiful plant when it's grown out. I love the growth on Lemandarin. And, you know, it's some sort of cross between Taiwanica and Satsuma, or Taiwanica and Karaji. It's something interesting like that. And it's been mostly hardy for a Virginia fruit grower, though I believe it does have some dieback in those really bad winters. I just want to get it up to size where it can really survive, because it almost did this past winter. And maybe it still would have lived, but I ended up regrafting what I had because one side of it was severely burned. It was sunburned and burned by the winds and everything while we were having that cold. So half of it looked good and half of it was actually dead down to the center of the stem. So it was just brown all the way through. That was also beginning to happen to Dimicelli once we saw below 15 degrees or so. It was also showing signs of that just on one side of the plant. So they were getting some burns. I think they might just require more protected conditions. I think under those same conditions, Ichang Lemon might also make it, but I'm not entirely sure on that. That one might be more marginal than these, actually. But following that, I do have one of our US 1283s out here, and this is one where no one's really sure about the hardiness, let alone the edibility, if any of that's worthwhile. So I only got one out here, and if they're good, I will add more. But this is a hybrid between a Nincat Mandarin, I believe, and a Trifoliate orange. So maybe good, maybe not, I don't know. We'll see, both in terms of hardiness and flavor, but it's a good growing plant nonetheless. And as you can tell, some of this material that we have here, these bud grafts, these are actually from the CCPP. So we got 1283, C54, and C57 all from there. Originally Trifiola and Benton as well. I forget if there's any others too. But kind of some of these last additions here. This one is Conestoga 121, which this is another one where it looks a lot like a Trifoliate orange, but this one is definitely more distinguishable from the others. Also less hardy, so there is that correlation. But look, it even threw out a leaf where those leaflets were like all merged together there. But this one has the unique quality in that the beginning of the flush will be thorny, and then those thorns just completely disappear. So it can actually be thornless on a lot of that latter growth, which is perhaps a useful quality for harvesting fruit. If it bears perhaps towards the outside and there's less thorns on the outside, this could be a useful plant. However, I'm not sure about the fruit quality. It hasn't fruited yet, so this is one of those seedling selections from Mel, where we're just going to find out what it does. We do have a couple others we're going to have out here. One of them was ready to go out into the field, which is Stoga 067, one of the more unifoliate types. We're trying to put 058 out here, but I've had a really hard time grafting that one again. The grafts took well on Citrange, but getting it to take on Trifoliate Orange has been a bit of a pain, which is interesting. I've gotten it to work before, but we just haven't yet this season. But as you can tell, look, those leaves are a lot more citrus-like on this one. You do still get mixed foliage, but we're trying to test these. I know 067 actually survived last winter on the multi-grafted and the Trifoliate tree, but I'm just trying to get them now on their own trees out here. So 058 will be joining it shortly once we get some growth on the grafts that we've redone for like the third time. But that is it for this little row that's starting here. Now let's get into the maybe one of the most exciting parts. I'm not sure. Honestly, Ponerus Plus stole the show today with those unexpected blooms. Maybe just for me. But beginning our seedling selection row, we have some of our older stuff from last year that did really well. Starting with Tri XL, we're calling it, which is a hybrid between the Tri and probably Swingle, if I had to bet, because there's an open pollinated seedling that looks a lot like a Citrumelo, a lot like a Swingle would, and I know from its source there was a large Swingle tree in the vicinity very close to the Tri, so it's very likely. And Tri, I guess people didn't always know this, but it does produce zygotic seeds, and a surprising amount of them. It's not always true to type, and in fact, I might have seen as high as 20%, 25% zygotic seedlings, so maybe 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 have looked different than the parent. But it depends. Sometimes you will see different numbers in different batches. I've seen them look a lot more true to type, where it's maybe 10% or less. But either way, Tri is capable of being a mother in these crosses, and it bore this cross, which is an extremely, extremely vigorous plant. Something between those sour orange and grapefruit genes with the Trifoliate Orange too has created such a robust and hardy plant. It has an incredibly thick stem for its age, and the graft unions here are just, it's really outgrowing the Trifoliate Orange it's on. As you can tell, it's a bit enlarged on that one and very enlarged on that one, so perhaps a little bit incompatible with Trifoliate Orange, but it might just be due to that intense vigor. But look at that, you see how that almost looks like Iva? Sometimes you can't tell with these, but you could definitely tell on that one. There's some Citrumelo in that, but it came from a Tri fruit. So what does that mean? It means that this is likely a hybrid between the two. It's a bit speculative with some of these open pollinated hybrids, but that's the best I've been able to come up with on that one. Now we have Tri is what I originally called this. I don't know if it needs a new name now because it is not bifoliate. It is almost completely unifoliate. Now, it does look different from the Taiwanica lemons there, but if you didn't know better, and I told you this was a Taiwanica lemon hybrid with Trifoliate Orange, you wouldn't believe me. This looks like a normal citrus, and while you can tell on the leaves there's a little something different going on, you really have to hunt and search for the leaves that tell all the story. But again, being a second generation hybrid, you can get a lot more citrus genetics in some of these 50-50 crosses. So they might not necessarily be 50% Trifoliate Orange, 50% Taiwanica lemon. But this one weathered the winter fairly well. It maybe had a little bit of damage, but not too bad. And it's growing at a pretty good rate. Not our fastest, but certainly not our slowest either. So I did high graft a second one. Just for some of these, I wanted to have some backups if they seemed more promising, perhaps. But both of those are doing really good. The next one I'm really excited for here because I think this one has a lot of potential too. This is a Tri-clemuse selection. So this is another one of our seedlings of the Clemuse 2-2 or 10-degree Tangerine. And as you can tell on that growth, it does have bifoliate and trifoliate leaves, but it's largely still unifoliate. And so I've speculated that these Tri-clemuses might be an open pollinated hybrid between Sacaton Citrumelo and Clemuse 2-2, only because we'll get into it, our Sakaton seedling seems to have qualities of the 10-degree Tangerine or just Papeda genetics in general. And given their close proximity to each other on Stan's farm, where we got these seeds originally and selected from those batches that were growing, it's all kind of adding together where I think we have a hybrid between the two on both fronts, where some seed, well, a lot of the seed has been coming from the clemuse, and one seed came from the Sakaton. So this is very, very interesting. So perhaps those bloom times overlap, and I don't know if this one's more sensitive to the heat and drought, or if it's just been more tender, but you could see it has really broad, lush leaves. They're just kind of curling up right now with all this wind and heat we've been getting. Which, by the way, these are going to be heat tested because next Monday and Tuesday, I believe, we're seeing perhaps around 100 degrees, maybe over that. It's going to be real hot soon, so these get tested in terms of heat and cold. But I have 2 copies of that Tri-clemuse. I think this is number 3 in terms of the order that we've been finding these. And some of them have been cold because they didn't survive as well or they didn't grow as well. But number 3 seems very, very promising. It's a very vigorous grower because this plant is not that old and it's already shot up so much. I don't know, but it might be more vigorous than our number 1, which is, we're going to get into it. That's my favorite of them. Probably of all the seedlings. I have a lot of faith in it. But next up, that's our backup copy, and this is our original of the improved Sakaton, as we've been calling it, our likely open pollinated hybrid between Sacaton and Clemuse, which you can see here what I'm doing. I'm picking off these lateral sprouts because I only want one strong central leader. So I've been doing that to all these plants, but I wonder if you could tell on this one. I think you can if I get up close enough. You see that reddish tinge to that growth? Sometimes that's stronger than others depending on the temperatures, but this has that reddish growth trait, I guess, that you can see in a lot of Papeda types of citrus or Papeda hybrids. So you can see it in the Yuzu or some Clemuse hybrids, things like that. Not to mention, the most common leaf type is that, Unifoliate. And not only that, based on its appearance, it does remind me of the 10-degree Tangerine, where I'm thinking, we actually got more trifoliate leaves on this current flush, but it kind of alternates. You get some of those. But I'm thinking because of the unusual appearance and the colors, and I've crushed the leaves and they're actually very nicely scented, I think this is a hybrid with Yuzu genetics, Trifoliate genetics, grapefruit, Mandarin. I think some of those crosses have a lot of potential, and they kind of just happen. Nature made them happen. You know, they're miracle plants, I would say. It's really cool. In following it, you see number 1 here, absolutely tall. But look at these leaves. I love the appearance and the fragrance and the hardiness of Tri-clemuse number 1. This is a plant where I'm going to get this one out as far as I can. I have a lot of faith in the fruit, though we don't know yet. That's why we're testing it. But it's highly unifoliate. It's very vigorous. It was probably one of our hardiest selections we made. It didn't even flinch at 10 degrees and 66 hours below freezing and all this bright sun and heavy winds, nothing. This thing was bulletproof here. So I think it can survive even lower than that. I've actually sent this one to Mellon, Pennsylvania too. I think along with, which one? I think I also sent maybe Dragon Lemon and was it our Tri XL to see just how hardy those are too. I don't think they're negative temperatures hardy, but they just show a lot of promise. And this thing is actually sitting, it's almost at 6 feet tall already, which is really impressive. Kind of same for Tri XL, that one's close to that. And I did graft a little backup here. So this is just to have another for the sake of having another. That's how some of these are. Our improved Swingle here, looking really good, growing along nicely. It's not our most vigorous selection, but it is an interesting one, being a Swingle and having leaves like that. Again, more aromatic as well. So I have faith for the fruit on this one. It might be an interesting competitor with some of the other Citromelos, but I don't have the same faith in its hardiness. I think when it really comes down to the wire, the others may still beat it in that department. But we don't know for sure. Nothing is definite. And that's just another clone of that one, grafted a little bit higher up. Next here, man, honestly, I'm excited for all these. I keep getting to them, I'm like, oh, I'm really excited for this one. I'm excited for all of these. This is our Dragon Lemon, as we've been calling it. I don't actually know if the fruit are going to look like a lemon. I may have to rebrand this one. And that's why I'm going to try and hold off on naming all of these right away. I might just have them specified as their crosses in number 1, 2, 3, and we'll figure out names once they fruit. But dragon lemon is very unique in having been a open pollinated flying dragon seedling that eventually became clear to me that it was a hybrid. Because at first it just seems like a trifoliate orange that deviated from the rest. Perhaps it was a zygotic seedling that had no resin, because the leaves tasted good. They had a lemony taste to them. They didn't taste resinous or bitter. And I mostly selected that because the plant looked slightly different from the rest. So I'm like, let me try the leaves. It's just something I've done when I'm looking around at some of these seedling plants. And what do you know? It's its own thing. And grafted on rather small trifoliate orange rootstock, it's very vigorous actually. Yet it has the contortions. So it has this twisting growth habit, these crazy thorns, which look, I've even used it to secure it on the bamboo pole. Vicious, curly thorns, and look, some of them have even formed little branches at the tips, which is just wild. But it's a very funky growing plant, really cool to look at. And again, similar to the dragon lime, if it produces more edible fruit and it has that ornamental value, this is going to be a real winner. And I think it's going to be very hardy too, considering how much like the flying dragon it is. So we have a little backup there, but these are both growing very vigorously. I'm very impressed with that actually, because I didn't expect that. This one is another one that's really high on my list for ones I'm most excited about. This is the Trichang lemon, so some sort of hybrid, between a trifoliate hybrid and an I-Chang lemon. Based on the leaves, it seems like it was some sort of 50-50 hybrid. Could have been a Citrumelo, a Citrandarin, a Citrange, whatever, crossed with I-Chang lemon, which is great timing because our I-Chang lemon out here died. And I was kind of sad about that because I wanted to grow I-Chang lemon here, and I still have a plant in the greenhouse, but I wanted to grow it outside. But at least until the plants are older and more established, they just don't seem safe here. Yuzu seems like a more reliable pick to kind of fill that niche. But if we have hybrids that end up being similar to the I-Chang lemon, but better in terms of hardiness, I'll definitely take that. And these are absolutely gorgeous. This number one here has this really strongly reddish colored new growth, and it could be even stronger on plants that have less sun exposure or probably in cooler temperatures. Correction on that. I think cooler temperatures and sun exposure, you'll see really dark purple on this, but that new growth will be so dark and it makes these really pretty dark leaves, very thick, very robust, vigorous grower. You can see some of that mixed foliage does pop up every now and then, which you'll see. There's a trifoliate leaf. I've had plants, and I have one in the greenhouse that had whole shoots of trifoliate and bifoliate leaves, and maybe I'll show you that. But I know almost for certain that this is a hybrid, because I know sometimes these Papeda and Papeda hybrids can put out kind of funky leaves with those larger petioles. Sometimes you can see what looks like a bifoliate or trifoliate leaf, but I'm fairly certain on these. And again, look at that new growth. Look at how dark that is. That is so pretty. And to have that on a large plant, if you guys can just imagine this thing being 20 feet tall and having a new flush and just all that reddish growth appearing on the tree, that is beautiful. So if this one's a hardy one, I think this is another winner. I'm really excited about it. If it has purple flowers too, forget it. I'm gonna love this plant. So I'm cloning this one a lot, and I'm already gonna see if I can get this to some of you guys in the near future. I wanna test this out in some different states. Its sibling, Trichang number 2, is not as pretty. It's also very interesting though. It still has very cool leaves, kind of more rippled, if that's the right word. As you can see, more indented, more creased, and it does still produce trifoliate leaves every so often. There's definitely another one. Yeah, there's another one in there if you could see. So it seems interesting. It's less vigorous than number 1, or I shouldn't say that. It's actually growing a bit taller, or maybe pretty equal on the same type of rootstock, but it doesn't grow as thick, I should say. So it's not as robust, maybe, if that's the correct term, but it's certainly still a good grower by all means, and it has the potential for improved hardiness, and we'll see about fruit quality. But having a hardier I-Chang lemon, again, it's something I'm excited for. Next down the row, we have the broadleaf Taiwanica lemon. I don't have an exact name for it now, but this is a seedling of Taiwanica, and you could tell it looks very different. Those aren't Taiwanica leaves, but they are. It is a true seedling, and it has really large thorns too, actually. Look at those. Massive. But it stood out to me because of the leaves. They looked so different, and I want to test if it's as hardy or hardier, because this indicates some degree of variation. I don't know what the differences are going to be, but it's worth trying out. Sometimes I just save some of these seedlings for the sake of having something different, because that's something different. You never know if that could be something truly worth saving and, you know, trying to preserve those genetics. Next up, precocious Yuzu. Hasn't been so precocious after it's been grafted, but we don't know in the grand scheme of things if this will fruit earlier anyways. But as a seedling that was just a couple months old, this one did flower, and I think I've done videos about this before. But I did manage to graft it out, and we'll see how hardy it is too. If it's at least as hardy as standard Yuzu, it will do just great out here. And then we can kind of evaluate that precocity a bit further. So I'm really interested in how this one will perform and when it will flower next, because it did flower relatively early on. This one is a weird seedling. This is a Sakaton Citrumelo with completely unifoliate leaves, and they're broad and dark and thick, and I don't know if it's a triploid or something like that, because I've seen some stuff about that. So if it was seedless, that would be crazy. But as you can see, it has no trifoliate leaves. I maybe seen only 1 or 2 bifoliate leaves in its lifespan, its short lifespan. But this seedling did survive outside on its own roots in a pot down to 10 degrees. And it only took very, very light damage. So considering the qualities it has and the circumstances it was in, I think it deserved to be grafted. And we'll put that hardiness to the test again. And if it doesn't make it, if it was just a fluke, it is what it is. But I have some faith in it, considering just how well it did as such a young seedling. Now the next 2 varieties here, or next 2 seedling selections, these are some really interesting ones. These originated from Sweet Home Alabama Homestead's Prague plant. So these are seedlings of the Prague Chimera. So instead we're calling them the Prague Satsuma, and credit to him, Wall Prague Satsuma number 2 and number 1. So we have these numbered accordingly. But these are interesting because of how different they are, and I can't quite explain this one. Now it is having, finally, a trifoliate flush, but if you see all the leaves I was seeing before that, it was so strongly unifoliate, I had no idea what was going on. I'm like, is this a 50% hybrid? Is this some sort of weird gene transfer situation? Look, I've seen this on some other plants before. You every now and then you see those thorns that turn into branches. It's so unusual. But I didn't know what was going on with this thing, because look at it. That is supposedly a 50% hybrid between Trifoliate and Satsuma, assuming the Prague pollinated itself somehow between its 2 halves, which does seem to happen. You'll get some seeds that are truly Satsuma and some that are clearly Satsuma. But this one has rather nicely scented leaves. It seems fairly hardy. I think it could be a winner in terms of the Citrandarins and Satsumas we have. This could be a really good one. The one next to it, I have less faith in it, but I'll still try it out. It looks a lot more vicious. It has crazy thorns, crazy looking foliage, which is kind of steadying out a bit now. It just doesn't look as edible and the leaves aren't as good, but for curiosity's sake, let's find out what it produces. That's just how it is with some of these, because it's an interesting cross nonetheless. Our third one, our third Satsuma, Prague Satsuma we have here, this one is the most highly trifoliate. So this seedling came up and it was just very, very strictly trifoliate. I don't think I've seen a single mixed leaf on this one. But I haven't really tasted the leaves. I could give this one a nibble now on camera, just one of these bottom ones, and we could see, because I'm not sure. It's not a bad leaf, but yeah, it's not bad. It tastes like a hybrid. A lot of those hybrids will taste a little citrusy, maybe a little piney, or a slight bitterness, but not too bad. So that one has decent prospects for edibility, and I think this one has the least. But we'll test all three, see how they compare in terms of hardiness and flavor. Next up, this is a seedling selection of X639, and I don't know if it's a hybrid or what, but the seedling had very large, broad leaves. And again, I don't know if that's some sort of chromosomal thing, or if this is an open pollinated hybrid, or if it's simply just variation doing its thing. But we saved it because it seemed a bit interesting. Now, after this, what are these guys here? This one is an interesting one. That is your 5-star Citrumelo and US 1279 crossed. So a cross between a Citrandarin and a Citrumelo, and two pretty decent ones at that. Now, I had a bunch of variation in these seedlings. These came from the fruit from Mel, the 1279 fruit, because 1279 is highly zygotic, which I forgot to mention earlier. That's another great benefit. On top of it being a good Citrandarin and hopefully being hardy, it's great for breeding as well. Kind of like the US 852, a lot of those Changsha and Trifoliate hybrids. But this one seems like a good seedling. It displayed a lot of good qualities, good vigor, more unifoliate, stuff like that. So we've got it out here. And a lot of these are new additions. So they're quite tiny right now, but I still want to show you guys. And keep in mind, we'll gloss over it maybe if we head towards the greenhouse. I have a bunch of others actually that are in a similar stage or approaching the same readiness to come out here and join these too. But a lot of cool open pollinated and intentionally pollinated hybrids. This is a Glen Citrangean. So this is a seedling I got from, what is it? I think we also got this from the University of California at Riverside. I think this was from one of their trees there. So that's your hybrid between the Citrange and Calamandan. And next to it, I also got this in the same batch of seeds. This is a Citraldan. This is a Calamandan and Trifoliate orange hybrid. I actually have two of these, one that is highly trifoliate and true to type, and this is the off type. This one is highly monofoliate and bifoliate, and it seems to be perhaps more edible. We'll test the hardiness, but if we could get something that's pretty good, I mean, those Calamandan genetics, it should be a heavy bearer and a great ornamental. So I have a lot of faith in the Citraldans, and I'm really curious to see how they'll taste. This next one here, I did have several seedlings of, but this one seemed to be the best one. I'm going to try and get maybe one or two others out here. This is your N1 Trivos seedling. So it is a suspected cross between I-Ching, Papeda, and Citrumelo. Some people were thinking, or it was originally stated, sorry, that it was a Trifoliate orange and I-Ching Papeda cross, but since then people have speculated based on the foliage and the shape of the fruit, things like that, that this is actually a Citrumelo hybrid. I'm not sure. I'm leaning towards that. That seems likely. But I just saved the strongest growing seedling that was also the most trifoliate. And it does have a little color to the new foliage too, so I think this is just going to be a really exciting seedling if it's very hardy. But if it's, and it is currently, if it's strongly resembling the I-Ching Papeda and Trifoliate orange, I think we got a good thing going right there. After that, I have several seedlings I selected that were all a little different from each other. There's maybe two that are the same. These are the 5-star Citrumelo and Yuzu hybrids. So another really hardy hybrid. These come from Ilya, I believe it's pronounced. I could be wrong. Ilya in France, who bred these selections originally. And these just seem like really good options in terms of hardiness and edibility. The fruit are supposed to be very lemon-like, and overall they just seem like beautiful plants. I've seen pictures of them, and I just had to have this one. So this one right here is more trifoliate, as you could tell. I saved it because of that. So not expecting the best edibility on that one, but I was really curious because it's got Yuzu in it too. And I think breeding with Yuzu is just a great idea. This one seems truer to type. I think the original is a lot more unifoliate, but that one seems to be a lot better, a lot more citrus-like. But I have tasted and kind of tested the aroma of these leaves, and it's not exactly like a Yuzu. It's very unusual. I have no idea how I would even describe it, but this one appeared to be quite the same. But very thick leaves and very they have very profound kind of dots on those leaves there. I'm very interested to see how these mature and grow out, but I think they'll do pretty well considering how they've started. We've got one more back here, which this one seems to have a bit more enlarged petioles and a bit darker color on those new leaves. You can see those outer edges get those anthocyanins. Actually, that's a good leaf if we could focus on it. As you can see that one there, a lot more Papeda-like with that reddish color too. I think that's going to be a really cool one there. So we have two that are definitely different from the original and two that seem true to type. In general though, it seems like it produces pretty mixed types of seeds. Some seem true, some don't. And again, that's good for further breeding. This can be crossed yet again. After that, some of these, this one actually dropped its leaves, so we'll see if it comes back. But the rest of these are Bishop and US 852 selections, mostly chosen ones that were more unifoliate or unifoliate and bifoliate. So these are ones that I think might have more citrusy flavor and qualities, and hopefully we'll test, they will also be hardy as well. This one I saved though, it was actually highly trifoliate, but the leaves had no bitter taste and the growth was really good on it. It was just such a healthy seedling. I saved it because maybe it'll be an option for those of you in colder zones. So in the future, I could send this to someone in a much colder zone and have them test it. And, you know, at least I can make some sort of contribution for that space, because most of my breeding is probably going to be for zone 7 and zone 8, unfortunately. So for those of you in zone 5 and 6, maybe this will be an option. I'm hoping it is. And then we just got, that's another 852 right there. Not much to look at, as you could tell. But let's finish this off. That was a lot to go through. And we're already past the hour mark. Wow. Let's take you guys to the greenhouse. Just quick, I'll show you a little bit of what's going on there, and we'll wrap this up. But if you made it this far already, I know almost for sure you're subscribed. If you're not, please subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me what you got going on. It's always good to hear from you guys. And if you've listened to me for this long, you got to have something to say, right? So this is our nursery stock, by the way. A lot of our Prague plants, Bishop, Carolina Lime. I think we had a few available recently. Citromelos, Dragon Lime, stuff like that. Some of them aren't available yet, but they will be soon. I've kind of just had to fertilize everything because we fell behind on a lot of stuff and our plants just weren't growing up to speed. And there's our watermelons. We did a video on that recently. Still looking good out here, getting some pumpkins. But if we come around this corner, I just up-potted a lot of these seedlings, which I think we have, there's at least 2 or 3 more additions for the Tri-clemuse series, so those Clemuse 2-2 hybrids. This, I believe, is one of them, as you can tell by that foliage. And is this another? No, that's not another. There's another in here, but perhaps it just has less growth. This is actually a Gerardo Buntan pomelo, which I did a community post. We had some seedlings that were displaying mixed foliage, which is very interesting because Stan's pomelo, where we got the seeds from, is in a greenhouse. So something brought in some pollen from one of his outdoor trees and we got crosses. So I'm not complaining. That's just something interesting. And well, we'll certainly grow it out and see what it ends up being like. And then I think this one, again, really tiny, some of this stuff here. That's another Citraldan. That's the Trifoliate type. So just kind of up-potted some of those that are growing. And we do have even more plants inside here that we're cultivating. A lot of these plants kind of closer to here. These are plants that will maybe make it out this season, but haven't flushed out yet. We got some, again, extra Mortons, and some of these have failed, but we have more seedling grafts kind of all just mixed up in here. But I did want to show you that Trichang lemon that I mentioned, how some of them are much more trifoliate. That's what I mean. Look at all those trifoliate leaves there. And look at the bifoliate and trifoliate leaves on that stem. So that's what the plant can tend to look like. And I mean, even on the number 2, was it this one? You will still see on those original seedlings a lot of that mixed foliage. But it's not always the case. Sometimes it's just every now and then. But in here, all these plants are looking really, really good now. Again, these were more that I had to fertilize because they were just looking a little light in color. But we have backups of like our Ichang Star 60 there, our Arimo Mandarin, Arimo Orange, our MIC here, which has some pretty gnarly suckers on it. Look at that variegated rang per line back there. We actually, a little sneak peek for some of you guys, I grafted a few of these, so these will be up for auction soon. We're going to have some copies. These will be the only plants in existence of this particular variegation, because again, we just discovered a seedling and we were able to graft it out and cultivate it. That's actually the original seedling, growing super slow on its own roots, but grown on Citrumelo and fertilized and kept in moderate sun conditions, these have done so much better. So they grow great on rootstock. On its own roots, there's just not a whole lot going on. It's not optimized. But you can see here, here's some more stuff. That is our, oh, I'm surprised that's flowering. That is our Clementine and Thomasville hybrid, which, sorry, let's try and get that a little brighter in here. That is a cross between Clementine and Thomasville, which I also received a seedling for recently that appears even differently. So I got this from a forum member who I think did his own cross with Clementine and Thomasville. So this is an exciting one. It appears quite different from that one, but the fact that that one's flowering, man, will we get a fruit off of that? That'd be so cool. I have no idea what that's going to taste like. We also have the Augusta Citrange doing good there, flushing out. Trifoliate, US 119, which you can see a nice fruit developing there. Get that to focus. Look at that pretty fruit. It's a decent size too. This is our Thomasville on Citrumelo. As you can see, it is now starting to bloom after it flushed out very nicely. Doing really good for a first-year plant. And one of the original Thomasvilles just loaded with flowers. The Sacaton citrangequat also blooming quite nicely over here. Not as much as the Thomasville, but still very pretty, and it does have a fruit that's kind of split, but it's set nonetheless. Next to it, this is our Carolina lime here. That's looking really good. Again, some of these are kind of greening up a bit now that they've gotten a little boost, so they should keep looking better. Our Prague Chimera back here, this is one of the kind of mother plants that we keep in the greenhouse here, and it's actually reaching a really nice size. This is a Taiwan lemon, one of the originals as well, looking really, really good. And the Yuzu next to it is flushing out hard. Next to that Yuzu, we got the Ichang lemon. I was kind of hoping that would fruit because it did flower this season, but those fruit are big, so it's not the worst that the fruit didn't hold. I think the Yuzu also fruited, but I was trying to cross these with Trifoliate orange, and the cross-pollinations just weren't setting fruit. I think by the time I got to these, maybe the pollen was too old, or they just didn't want to hold the fruit. 10-degree tangerine inside here. This one has had the most issues kind of with greening up, but it's actually looking a bit better now. Believe it or not, this was a lot more yellow a few days ago, so we're just going to keep hitting it. Some of these on the Citrange rootstocks I notice are a little more prone to deficiencies, which is interesting. This is our Sudachi, and that is loaded with fruit all up in here, and those are all crossed with Trifoliate orange. Similarly, our Shakwasha fruit, which you could see here, our Shakwasha we also crossed with Trifoliate orange. And we also got some Mineola and some Sugar Bell in there, some Karaji Mandarin. That I believe is a Satsuma and a Changsha and a Centennial Kumquat. And then we did a short on these, but our kumquats are starting to bloom nicely. I mean, our Nippon orange quat loaded with fruit right there. I mean, you guys can see that is just insane. But also, look at these kumquats too. I'll try and dim that a little. Our Miwa is loaded with flowers, and everything smells so nice over here. Our Marumi had so many flowers on it too. Our long fruit kumquat, which is this is kind of like a Nagami. I think it's a zygotic seedling of Nagami. Setting some nice fruit there. Fukushu, loaded with blooms. Look at those dense clusters. That's a really pretty one. Down here, we have another strain of Yuzu. That's that eastern strain. The one I showed before is the western. Seedless Changsha. So kind of like your, was it Grand Frost or something? Sweet Frost? I think it's Sweet Frost. But yeah, Seedless Changsha. delicious, one of my favorite mandarins. HRS 899A inside here, doing even better than that outdoor one, which is great. So we'll have several plants in different conditions, all doing well. Behind it, that is your Hong Kong kumquat setting some fruit. We have our improved 5-star Citrumelo in here. As you can see, I'm just grabbing these suckers as we go. Haven't seen these in a bit. That's looking really good. Look at those broad leaves, and some of them are completely unifoliate. Very interested to see that one. Is this number 82? Yeah, that's our number 82 there. Kind of looking a bit more distinguishable inside the greenhouse. And these are some grafts I did. I have some US 802 and Carolina Lime, which again, we're trying to get a little bit higher up. But for some of you who've been curious about the seedlings here, these are the Ponerus Plus seedlings. We have some Augusta citrangequat and was it 1915-7? And we also have more Augusta there. Some of these are actually already up for sale for the seedling bundles. We have the Tri seedlings looking really good there. Some Dunstans, which are recovering now. Some of these were not too happy a few weeks ago, as you could tell. They're a little sparse. Taiwanica seedlings looking great. These are probably also up, as well as the Clemuse 2-2, and similarly over there. But yeah, we have all sorts of experiments going on here, and more plants we're getting ready. Some more stuff like the Bishop and US 852 and stuff like that. Some of these doing better than others, but a lot of our greenhouse stuff is kind of recovering from some drought conditions we had, as well as I think some of them just weren't getting enough fertilizer either. So it was kind of a mixed bag that we had to address. But that is pretty much our full update for out here. I hope you guys enjoyed that, as I'm trying to figure out the lighting. This was going automatic, and the moment I want it a little brighter, a little darker, it's just flipping out. But I hope you guys enjoyed most of that there. This was a fun walkthrough through some stuff that we just haven't seen in a while. But a lot of exciting developments out here, a lot of stuff I'm still working on. You know, a lot of those seedlings I'm going to get planted out here, and even more will be joining them soon enough, and then we'll be pretty much done for the summer, and we're just going to see how well these all grow out and what else blooms in the more mature citrus rows here. Again, I'm really excited, and hopefully we can get some fruit set on the X639 or Ponerus Plus before it's too late. We have a pretty long season, so I'm sure some of that stuff may still ripen just in time. It might still be a little shy though, but I have hope that we can get some sort of fruit set, and maybe even some crosses from some of these fruit that are setting. But thank you guys for sticking around and watching all of this. If you made it till the end, again, let me know, what do you have going on? Are you making any crosses or even selections? You know, what are you growing? How's it doing this time of year? Stuff is looking great over here. As you can tell, there's some familiar faces, some stuff that may be coming back, and there's some plants that just didn't quite make it. But you can probably tell just by the shift in direction we're going with some of these plants what's generally been working for us here in North Carolina. But anyways, guys, that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.